Hello.
Yo, how you doing?
How's it going?
I'm doing wonderfully, you know. Just started stream. I took a shower. That's pretty much a daily thing, but it still makes me happy. How about yourself?
No, that's isn't showering is wonderful. It really is.
Good as it gets.
So I wanted to ask you something here on the off the top before we get started, just so I can prepare myself a little bit.
Hit me up.
What are the chances of a Destiny run-in with the steel chair?
During this conversation,
should I watch my back? Should I be ready for that eventuality?
it's always a possibility. He's a small, sneaky. You know, he could be hiding in any corner of your house at any time.
I don't know, by the way, if you want my camera on or not.
Oh no, yeah, go for it. I was getting it set up on my end.
Okay, my bad. There it is.
You never know. Come in for the sneak attack.
So yeah, a long time since we've last talked. A lot of things have happened. The whole pandemic craziness and shit. You know,
yeah,
Joe Biden's presidency.
Entirely too long on that. But we're here now, and you know, we're living in the moment. That's what matters.
Sure. So as far as what we're talking about today, I wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to. We talked very briefly about some possible subjects and shit. Is there anything that you would like to start with, given that, you know, this is your stream, we're on your turf here?
I wanted to catch up. I wanted to know how you've been doing during the pandemic, first and foremost.
Oh my God, man. Okay, well, I don't know if you keep up to date with DFF or at all. My show with TJ Kirk. I know you and TJ are friends.
I read the subreddit and I pop in on segments that seem interesting from time to time.
I'm so sorry that you read the subreddit. By the way, I apologize to anybody who's ever over at that subreddit, but they hate me over there, which is awesome for me.
To be fair, they do seem to hate me too. So there is an interplay there.
There's definitely factions. There are people that fucking love you over there, people that fucking love me over there, and we seem to be, even though we haven't talked in over a year, the centerpiece for that whole subreddit's existence for some fucking odd reason. So whatever. If you read any nonsense over there, apologies. Yeah, so we went totally distant. We were shooting in the same studio for the longest time, living in the same area. We went pretty immediately after the lockdown started, even though we were living in Louisiana at the time, and they were very, you know, they lagged on the lockdown.
Yeah, I bet.
The great thing about Louisiana was they were crowing about what low numbers they had when all these other states were locking down, and then they had Mardi Gras, and you can imagine what happened with that. People from all over the world brought COVID, and a huge outbreak happened in Louisiana. So we, prior to that, had the presence of mind to go socially distant. And we've been shooting the whole show socially distant since. I, in the interim, moved to California. Am I to understand that we live in the same state now, or are you?
We are separated by time and space, I'm afraid. I lived in California for a while, but now I'm in Washington.
Ah, I see. Well, I've lived in Washington, too.
What part of Cali?
So I'm in the great central San Joaquin Valley of California.
Very beautiful there. Very temperate.
The Inland Empire, as it's sometimes called. It is a very conservative part of California. I was born and raised here. Not where I'm at exactly now, but within a couple of hours of where I'm at. So,
how close are you to the vineyards?
I could go and walk and take you to the vineyards right from my house.
Beautiful. I've been to I went to Napa Valley once. I was with my family and I went to Napa Valley once. And I mean, I was too young to drink at the time. I must have been like 13 or something, but oh man, those valleys are just like picturesque, you know? They're like
beautiful.
Fantasy portrait artist went to town, you know? They all it's like oh god, I mean, anyone in the audience want to soy face and cream their pants. It's like the Blood and Wine expansion from The Witcher 3, you know? What was that place called? Was Toussaint? The big rolling fields in Spain, whatever. Anyway, it's beautiful.
For you,
yeah.
I can't. I'm one of those people that like I recognize. I stay away from talking about The Witcher when I talk games because I'm one of those rare folks that just I don't like it. I don't like the franchise. I'm the same way with Dark Souls, but I realize that people will just absolutely eviscerate me. So here's how I usually come at it. I say they're good games. They're just not for me.
That is a hard That's a tough call right there. What games are for you then?
Well, I'm an old head. I'm old. I'm 41 years old, and I've been a gamer since I was about 6 years old. I played my first video game on a Commodore 64 128. It was called Cave of the Word Wizard. So I go back. So I tend to be like more of the old style of games,
So it's
arcadey things,
Cave of the Word
fighters.
Wizard for you.
Cave of the Word Wizard is the pinnacle of gaming, of
Okay,
course. If you ever get a chance to let's play it, by the way, I can almost guarantee you'll love it. It's scary as fuck.
I got in on the Nintendo 64 era, so I think I'm 4 generations behind you on that one.
That's okay. That's okay. That's a great era to be born into. The N64 era was like the golden era of gaming, in my opinion. Like, because that led to the PS1. Like, it's right there with the PS1, and that's when everything just fucking exploded. That's when games became something so much more than like little platformers, and
Yeah, I got to have a blast back to the past playing those games. I guess to you it would be a blast back to your early 20s or mid 20s even. But I played a bunch of Nintendo 64 games during a charity fundraising stream for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which is like
yeah. By the way, I don't mean to interrupt you, but kudos to you. But more importantly, kudos to your community for raising a fucking insane amount of money. That was great. That was great direct action. So kudos to you, and most of the kudos to your community for coming out of pocket for a great cause.
I guess we all soy face for the Nintendo 64 games, huh? Yeah, the credit really does go to them. I just had to do an all-nighter playing video games. It was extraordinarily fun and easy for me. Other people were the ones who who put forward the big the big dollar signs.
For sure. But no, I actually like the genre, like the Souls-like genre.
Mm-hmm.
What I found was it's the setting of the Souls games that I'm already so depressive that the heavy, gray, dark, everything's black and gloomy thing, I think it had an effect on me. Like, so I play this game called The Surge,
mm-hmm.
which is a Souls-like game, but with like a cyberpunk future kind of aesthetic. And I love that game. So, it's just a matter of presentation, I think.
Yeah.
Which, incidentally, may be most of the difference perceived between you and I in our positions, matter of presentation, possibly.
Entirely possible. It's funny you say that, though, because, like, okay, last thing in the video games, I just want to say. Because, like,
sure, no.
Principally, there's absolutely no reason all of the gameplay of a Souls-like needs to be attached to the aesthetic of a Souls-like. There's really no reason. But Souls-like games are almost always, you have this too with like a Hollow Knight. Obviously, all the From Software games, it's gloomy, environmental.
Dark,
right. And I mean, I love that, sure. But hypothetically, you could have a game with identical gameplay mechanics in like a cartoony, bouncy, fun collectathon style aesthetic. There's really nothing keeping that.
Like a Souls-like Banjo Kazooie.
Oh,
think about that shit.
If you're running around, specifically with that franchise, you're running around. You got all your moves and with the bird and the bear and the big gorillas are throwing oranges. You got to roll through. It would be amazing. It'd be incredible.
Required that precision and that commitment to animation. You start an animation in Dark Souls, you got to finish swinging that fucking sword, right?
Chat's making fun of me. They're wrong. They would play that game.
Chat is wrong.
Too. Chat is wrong. As always.
Chat is usually wrong. Dude, chat would fucking eat Banjo Kazooie Souls-like up. They know they would.
Oh God,
deep down inside, they know
they would just be throwing their wallets at the GameStop.
Will you forgive me the pretense of wearing my sunglasses inside?
You are totally free to. Are your studio lights that bright?
Well, I have really super sensitive eyes. This is not all that interesting, so I'll keep it brief. I made a trip and visited some family members yesterday, did some swimming. I've got lots of nieces and nephews, and they splashed a bunch of chlorine into my eyes along with sunscreen dripping into them. And, I probably have minor chemical burns on my eyes right now. So they're prone to water. And I don't want anybody accusing me that I cried here today. No, I'm sorry. Sorry for the indoor sunglasses. I'm also sorry for the loud shirt too. But what are you gonna do? I'm in California.
We're very fine with the loud shirt, and you could also wear like a big duster hat. Just completely conceal everything beneath. Nobody knows. Nobody sees the tears.
True. I could do that. So, let me ask you a question. Are you completely burnt on kink at Pride? Is that a topic that you've...
That's a danger topic.
I understand it's a danger topic.
Hold on. What's your take on it? My answer will depend on what your take on it is, so I can tell what kind of conversation it's going to be.
It'll probably be contentious. My take doesn't. Okay, look. Maybe I misunderstand your take. I kind of engaged with you back and forth when you made some takes on Twitter. And correct me if I'm misquoting you. Mm-hmm. You said something like Pride should be safe, uncontroversial, family friendly, etc. I kind of take the tact that the protest element of Pride needs to remain intact. Because we have not, like, we here in America may feel that we've made the progress that is required to transfer Pride from something that is rooted in and very much still a protest for queer acceptance around the world, mm-hmm. and move it more to a friendly-faced environment for everybody. I love the idea. I think that's been done with a lot of Pride, by the way, corporatizing Pride. I mean, Verizon floats going down as part of Pride is pretty common, and a lot, especially like liberal city Prides, a lot of those places have dumbed it down. But the idea of a protest-based Pride is something I'm defensive of. And that's my take.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think, sorry, God. I think you have my take correct. Down to a point. I think part of Pride should be that family-friendly, accessible thing. The main thing to me is so Pride has to serve a lot of purposes, right? I mean, it's got to be fun. We all want to go there. The protest element is important. It's a sign of political solidarity, exposure, expression. But I think especially now that, at least in most of this country, most big cities in this country, being gay or being trans is significantly less stigmatized than it might have been, say, 20 years ago. I feel like now we're reaching a point where we're reaching a degree of acceptance where there's probably an understanding on the part of a lot of young people who are queer, who think they're queer, that there are resources they could access at Pride that they might not be able to access just wandering up there unattended. That there's a chunk of Pride should be a place that you can just go to with your family, and it's kept not uncontroversial, really, because gay people are always going to be controversial as long as we live in a society like this, but uncontroversial in the sense that, there's a reasonable expectation that you could go there, with family and with friends without it being, this big party performative celebration activism thing. A chunk of it. You go there with the kid gets some pamphlets from some little kiosks from local advocacy groups, and it's here's how you bind your chest if you're a trans guy or whatever,
So is that what you meant when you tweeted that you supported a two-party or a two-state solution for Pride?
Yeah, basically. I don't care what the relative proportions are. I just think it should be a good chunk. You know what I mean? And you can go there and it's not a super big deal. And if the rest of it's people running around doing kink or sex shit, I don't really care. I don't think this contributes much harm to society.
I don't think it does either. So, you bring up something interesting, and I agree. It's a different thing to be a queer person in a big city in America, mm-hmm. than it was 20 years ago when I was younger. And maybe a little bit of my head is still stuck in that, but I feel like there's still a whole lot of room for improvement, to put it very mildly, in the way that LGBTQ people are accepted, mm-hmm. and treated worldwide. Right. There are 76 countries where homosexuality is explicitly illegal, and the punishments for those can range from death to incarceration to ostracization, to being labeled as a sex offender and everything in between. There's also currently a bunch of ongoing pieces of legislation that just don't seem to want to die, mostly in southern states, actively attacking trans people, trans children. I mean, I'm sure you've covered these things, right?
From time to time.
And so, yeah. Right. So for me, that is just evidence that Pride it's not time to transfer Pride to a family-friendly street fair. Now, I don't think you're advocating for that. I think that a lot of the stuff that you're advocating for already exists at a lot of the Pride events.
It does,
Pride
yeah.
is a month. Pride is a month, right? It's not just one event. It's a whole month where all over the globe there are different types of demonstrations, and many of those places have family-friendly meet and greets where queer kids can meet activists and meet each other in a safe environment where there's not leather daddies leading people around and
Now,
blah blah, right?
I just want to be clear too, like, I don't think the presence of like leather daddies or like dildo suits that people run around, I don't think this like breaks children's brains. Like they see it and instantly they die, you know? Well, I just think that it's a matter of like putting on a good face for like parents who might be on the fringe about this kind of stuff, and it might make it easier for the kids to make a good argument, you know? Because I know if you're like a 16-year-old trans girl, or you're like in the closet, you know, and you're wondering like, okay, I probably need to make friends here who are trans. I can't just have like straight cis friends. I need to find some relatable people. I need to be able to get that outreach, you know? And you're talking to your parents, and your parents aren't like crazy woke or whatever. It's probably easier to sell them on the idea of like, oh, there's just like some little pride thing, whatever, we can go get like cotton candy. It's just like a little street fair thing. Haha, no, it's not like the rest of the pride, you know? Haha. Then it is like, okay, now let's go to the giant dick float where people are, where the automatic laser cannon that targets cishet people is firing indiscriminately into the crowd, you know, like slaughtering millions, you know? It's just an easier argument to make.
Agreed. So I understand that. I think those spaces already exist.
Yeah.
I'm torn with desire for the kind of original spirit of Pride to remain intact, because once again, the fight for queer acceptance here in America has not been won as much better as it may have gotten for people, especially in big cities. In more rural areas, gay people are still widely oppressed, both in schools and in public. There's still tons and tons and tons of places that need to hear that original message of out of the closets into the streets. We're here, we're queer, get used to it. And that really is the energy for me that defines Pride. And I've seen moral panics about Pride, and I've read about moral panics about Pride that predate me knowing about it, right? So back in the 1970s, the moral panic surrounding Pride was men and women, men kissing men in public. And women kissing women, along with the ever-present undercurrent of pedophilia / what about the children / how do I explain this to my child? And it was also, and trans people will love this one, men dressing as women. And the question was, mostly from conservative circles, how do I explain this to my children?
Which is the stupidest question. I mean, it takes like 2 seconds, you know? What, it's a guy, they like a guy. That's it. It's really simple stuff, actually. It was always a really bad faith, concern troll. The only concern that I have, this isn't necessarily a problem right now, but it's that the original spirit of Pride is a direct reaction to oppression, which means that if we ever want to see a day where like queer people aren't oppressed, that attitude is going to have to change as well. Just naturally as like a byproduct of the political discourse, you know.
How much should it change, though? That's really the question, right? How much should we allow what I would call straight normie culture to impinge upon how homosexuals, LGBTQIA people present themselves publicly, right? Now, I'm not talking about normalizing dildo suits or leather daddies in public and shit, right? That's not, in my mind, what Pride is about. But those things are encompassed as part of Pride. Part of Pride is meant to be shocking, right? Part of Pride is meant to be shocking to the sensibilities of people who misunderstand LGBTQ people.
Right, of course.
It's not necessarily about fitting in.
No, not about fitting in.
It's not about, like, it's about we're among you, right? We do fit in 7 days a week, 364 days a year. But during the Pride demonstration, we let you know we're here.
Well, the shock serves a purpose, right? You know what I mean? Like, if right now we had a big, like, women's march parade, and it was, like, women, like, you know, running around with their ankles exposed and big signs saying, "We can vote now, man pigs," it would come off as a little antiquated. The shock serves a political purpose. In 50 years, it may be the case, at least in some parts of America, that, you know, queer identities are accepted to the point where the idea of Pride being, like, this big, like, shocking wake up to the establishment comes off almost like this antiquated boomer tradition. And in fact, stuff like this has happened before, you know? You see this exact same sort of thing happening with older and younger generations of black Americans, where older generations of black Americans have a wildly different relationship, like people who grew up during the Jim Crow era, a wildly different relationship to the concept of like racial liberation than younger black people do. The older black people keep in their ways, and the younger black people just don't do it. Because in their mind,
you have to factor in the generational oppression as well.
Well, of course, and I'm not saying
that of course shapes this younger generation of black people's view on the ability to achieve actual black liberation.
Of course, but I'm not saying the oppression doesn't exist anymore. I'm saying the attitude towards it has changed. This is so, people have talked about this varying extents. Obviously, this varies massively between people, but as I understand it, black people who grew up during the Jim Crow era, they're very rooted in this respectability politics attitude towards achieving racial liberation. Black people, you talk a certain way, you stand up straight, you wear a suit when you go out and interview for a job. And younger black people.
The idea was to not allow conservatives and racists to undercut you by just judging you on your appearance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like don't give them the easy shot, okay? If they're going to be racist against you, they have to do it for your skin color alone, not because of how you dress or how you talk. But younger black people these days who are very involved in racial politics, they tend to be a lot more for like a more directly confrontational approach. Like, yeah, I can do what I want. I can wear what I want. I don't care if I have my pants down below my knees. Who cares? I'm still American. I don't care. That difference in that.
And why should anyone care?
Well, no, of course not. Yeah. But generational changes can affect the ways in which protest movements function. And I worry that as time goes on, the attitude towards pride is going to change immensely. Right now, most kids, like in America today, are watching cartoon shows that have explicit depictions of like homosexual parents like kissing and stuff, or like gay,
which is fantastic, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
In comparison, to speak as somebody that grew up in the 80s watching those kind of cartoons, it was unthinkable for there to be a trans character in a show, or
and now,
an openly homosexual cartoon character that had a gay relationship in a show. That's fucking would have been completely and utterly off the table.
Steven Universe
during my childhood.
Yeah, Steven Universe is like 5 incredibly popular seasons of explicit like gay and trans and non-binary allegories. The Owl House, which is currently airing, basically has like a gender fluid like lesbian as the protagonist. Basically, like
how many of these are reaching like younger kids though?
I mean, even Blue's Clues.
Steven Universe, as I know it, is kind of aimed at the like later teens, 20s crowd, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Blue's Clues recently had a giant pride march in their show with like they had like beavers with like the trans guy scars with like when you don't have the tits anymore or whatever. Those things, the things here. This is like Blue's Clues. I mean, we're reaching like baby kids here, So the only point that I'm making, and all this is wonderful, it's not just that, by the way. It's so much more. The thing that I like about this, I mean, obviously it makes a lot of people, they grow up, they feel like more included. Eventually, all these kids, they're 8 years old now, they grow up, animation, media, it's all very gay friendly these days, or queer friendly. They're going to grow up, and the idea of a pride parade, of being super like angry and like shocking the straight establishment, it's not going to be as relevant to their experiences growing up. With time, pride will change, and I just want us to be amicable to those changes rather than to enforce a generational divide when that has to happen.
I completely agree with that. Okay. I do not have a disagreement that pride should represent the generation that it represents, right? I don't think that pride has to be tied to the stone wall forever.
However, but always informs the present. I mean, you could ask like
it has to, right?
Rebecca show that you never forget. Yeah.
That is my big contention is that we as older queer folk to use, to talk about it with pride terminology. I don't usually self-identify as queer, but we would be under that umbrella at Pride, right? You and I both.
That's another generational thing,
men. Huh? Right, of course, right? So you and I as queer folk, we have to pass the knowledge of what came before. Matthew Shepard's name has to be known by every child. What happened to him in the 90s, and that was not that fucking long ago, was unconscionable. Matthew Shepard was crucified, literally, on a fence post in the middle of nowhere and left to die. okay, because he was gay. This is not so long ago. I was his age when it happened as a closeted bi kid. So that has to be pushed forward to this younger generation. And preserving part of that in pride, I think, is a way that we can do that, right? Because kids are so adverse. And I'm not trying to talk about Zoomers. I know there's probably a lot of Zoomers in your audience. Please don't.
Dabbing, dabbing it with every word. Yeah.
Sure. I'm just saying, like, they're rightfully adverse to being told how to think and what to do. I love that about the Zoomer generation. They don't take shit off anybody, right? They get their information. They believe what they believe. Sometimes they're wrong, like all kids are, but I like their kind of anti-authoritarian stance when it comes to information, at least as I understand it.
Right.
That being said, we have to find a way to communicate.
You can't forget the history.
Way to communicate the importance, right?
Because
the history
things could always backslide too. That's what a lot of people, I mean, especially liberals, they forget this. You know, you fight for your civil rights, and that's great. But there are people in this country, I swear to God, with just, if President Trump got a second term and he really pushed for it, I bet you could get probably about a quarter of this country saying that slavery was like a better economic system than what we have today. I really believe that. There are people in this country who are either so reactionary or so open to reactionary thought that if they're given even a modicum more political power than they have now, everything goes back to how it was. We can, in a second. There are countries, the Weimar Republic in Germany was the most progressive major country in Europe at the time, and nobody at the time would have thought that what could have happened next actually would happen, you know?
Sure, of course. Nobody saw Hitler. Nobody saw the Reichstag, and nobody saw nobody saw that coming.
That people wore back in the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, the attitudes towards homosexuality. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that lesbianism was actually considered to be... I remember reading a book, and it was on people would go to the Weimar Republic, to Berlin, for their, like, holiday homosexuality, where, like, men and women, because the attitudes were so lax there compared to the rest of Europe, that people would travel there to, like, meet a cute boy or cute girl, if they were themselves a boy or a girl, respectively. And then nobody expected. And then 2 years, and everything goes to ash, you know?
Yeah, and I fear that as well. So I think that this is actually a good segue into something else I wanted to talk to you about, once again, with your consent. And if you have more to say about kink at Pride, I don't want to force you off of that topic. I'm definitely down to hear more.
No, not at all.
If you're willing to segue, so a lot of people in your audience are probably not aware. The folks that are watching, you know, in my audience are aware. I've started, you know, I've kind of changed my tact since last we talked.
It's been a while. It's been like,
sure,
like over a year.
And I would credit my talk with you as a catalyst for a lot of the changes that came in me, like searching for what your audience seemed to want from me, which was the one I really watched our interaction, right? And I watched the audience's reaction as we spoke and try to really take it at face value. Now, there was a lot of bullshit in there, as will be in any fucking chat.
I think they just want you to be happy, Paul.
Well, I am happy then. That's one thing I didn't mention. I'm married in the interim since last we talked.
Oh,
so,
wait, shit, I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Yeah, there you go. There it is. Married in December during the height of the lockdowns here in California. So we had to have a socially distant justice of the peace wedding, which was interesting. But hey, we did it, and now that we're both vaccinated, we're planning to do some, you know, little family get-togethers and wedding ceremony thing. So
that's
cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, you know, if that's all they want me to be is happy, I'm a happy guy. You know, I have my happiness.
I don't know if you're looking at my chat. They are happy that you're happy. They do want that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. My happiness notwithstanding. One of the things that I saw people asking for over and over again was what is Paul's solution? I seem to be tearing down this kind of lesser of two evil voting as ineffectual, vaguely kind of gesturing towards labor, but really had no kind of plan, right? And I agree. I agree with that criticism, or at least agreed with that criticism at the time, and have worked kind of hard to develop something like a plan. Now, I don't know if you'll agree that this is necessarily a plan, because it's coming from a person who is kind of naturally against orthodoxy, right? And so I am as for tearing down the current system as someone can be. I see it as something that exports misery and violence all over the fucking globe, especially the global south. Massively exploitative there. And I can't ignore those things going on at the behest of the country that I live in, and look at the comfort that I live in with my air conditioner, you know, and not know that that was earned by the sweat and tears of, you know, POC and trans and LGBTQ folks in the global south, and just being factory farmed by our crony capitalism, right?
Right.
So my position has always been anti-orthodoxy. And so really my kind of journey towards coming to a point relied heavily on labor, which, to be honest with you, I know from my childhood. I was raised in a labor household. My father was a union president, local number 254, glass molders, pottery, plastics, allied workers. It was an AFL-CIO union. And, you know, this was before latchkey was widely available. So as a kid, when mom and dad had to go to a union meeting, I had to go as well. And it was a really formative thing for me, because I watched men and women argue with one another in a very passionate way, and sometimes had absolutely clashing visions in the microcosm of labor, right? In the microcosm of working out a contract with the factory. I saw all of these boisterous, passionate opinions, and eventually what happened? Beautiful consensus, right? And I saw, and so I have this preconception, and maybe I'm wrong, that labor is an environment that can break down preconceived barriers. So what I mean by that is, I was watching a video of yours, and I don't know if you've changed since this. It was right after Biden got elected. I did some Vaush watching, you know, obviously to prep myself to see what you were up to.
That's the best part of the day.
Right, of course. And that's where I got my Destiny joke earlier, by the way, because I saw that you and he were. By the way, not to have a sidetrack, but I'm a fan of Destiny's from way back. Not so much his political streaming, but back in the Justin TV days when he was like a StarCraft streamer and shit.
Yeah, it goes way back.
So he's been streaming. That dude's been around a long time. Since he became a political kind of guy, I've not been as much a fan of his, but you know, back in the old days, hey, we're both a little more commonality there. Anyway, as I was saying, labor to me is an environment in which barriers can be broken down. So in the video just after Joe Biden was elected, you said, what do we do? And what you meant was, what do we as leftists do? Was our primary job, right? And if I misquote you, please correct me. I'm, you know, obviously paraphrasing. But you said that, you know, the primary job of leftists was to convert liberals, right? We need to bring liberals left, which I agree needs to happen.
Yeah. But I mean, liberals are the primary body there. If you can get conservatives or centrists or Nazis or whatever, who the hell else, then, I mean, that's great too, obviously.
Are you open to the idea that that could happen in the labor space?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Are
you familiar? Are you not to gish gallop you, but are you familiar with contact theory or contact hypothesis?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for it. I think that
right,
because I think so. One of the things that I think is really cool is, one of the frustrations that I have is that there are a lot of people who are economically left wing who get baited into voting Republican because they're terrified of, like, I don't know, BLM or trans people in bathrooms or some stupid shit like this. So they're acting against their class interests, you know. But there's a corollary to that, and it's the blue dog Democrats. They're on the other side of things. Many of them, the blue dogs, politically less relevant now, sure, but they were reactionary for the most part.
You're right. No, but I remember the blue dogs very, very well. They were relevant during my younger years.
Yeah, they like their unions, and for that reason, they continued to vote Democrat. Their economic awareness, their proximity to labor, it pushed them over towards voting for people or for pushing for positions they might not have otherwise. If it wasn't for those unions, those people would have been voting red.
You're absolutely right. Let me steelman your position a little bit here with an anecdote that recently happened to me. So I told you I grew up in the Central Valley of California, very conservative area. I recently went and visited some family there and saw some cousins that I hadn't seen since pre-pandemic. And these cousins of mine, I grew up around the same time as them. They're all from the same family, and their father, he was involved in this too. They're all very conservative, of different stripes, of different kind of extremities, but they all kind of agree. Very Trumpy kind of people, right? One of them, and I won't sully. I don't know how you feel about contextual use of slurs. Obviously, YouTube is bad, so I won't use them. But
careful, we're on Twitch, so we got to be careful with that.
Of course. So the F slur, he used it like it was 1995. You know what I mean? Like I'm there. I'm out as bisexual, but I don't know that my cousins know that, because being out as bisexual is, I haven't sat down with each one of these. Like I said, I haven't seen them in a long time, right? And so I could have shut down that conversation. And here's how I could have done it. Hey, dude, you know, the fucking F slur thing, you're going to have to stop that because I'm bi. Now, I'm not saying it's right that would have shut down the conversation, but on his end, I know my cousins and shit, it would have been done and we would have had no more conversation. But you know what I did instead? Kept my mouth shut about that shit. Sticks and stones may break my bones and all of that fucking shit, right? And went directly to labor. Now, these guys are all members of labor unions. Most of them connected with law enforcement, right?
Cool.
And they're in California and they vote for they vote for the Democrat. And I asked them why. They were like, I haven't voted for a Republican governor since ever. And I was like, why? Why is that? And they were like, because the Democrat shows up to our union meetings. When we invite the political candidates to come and speak at our big statewide union meetings, they come. So that's why we vote for. So you're talking about Gavin Newsom here,
right?
Who is, you know, not a super lefty or anything, but when it comes to conservatives, he's a big boogeyman.
Right, right.
But here are these hardcore Trumpers that are just completely accepting of him because he has a labor message.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize, this is what really bothers me on the left. The right, or at least the leadership on the right, they understand this so well. What the people on the left don't seem to understand is that people do not vote rationally. They do not vote as a sum total of all of their political positions and interests, averaged out to whichever side is best for them or for what they believe. People are susceptible to so many influences. Sometimes something as simple like as a guy showing up to your union meetings. I mean, that can be it. Now, logically, that doesn't mean anything with regards to who you should vote for. If you're talking,
and that's what they said too. By the way, not to interrupt you, but they told me, they were like, he doesn't do shit for unions, but at the very least, he gave us the fucking respect to show up. And their vote instituted more left-wing policy than a vote for the conservative governor would have. Right? Gavin Newsom, you have to give him that, right? He's a lib, but he'd probably be better than a fucking, you know, super conservative governor or some shit, right? So that's the type of like winning of people over from the right to maybe even accidentally vote for leftism, right?
People are so susceptible to that. And again, I'm not trying to this isn't just like, oh, conservatives are dumb, you can move them however you want. This is everybody. Everybody gets moved over. They get moved over by stories and by feelings. Most people are moved over by that. Very few people are moved over by a full understanding of the political ideas being expressed. I'd be willing to bet probably 2 or 3% of this country keeps up with politics enough to understand what policies are being voted for by the candidates they support. I genuinely don't think it goes past that. So what lefties, what they forget, what they don't do, is they forget the necessity of telling stories that mean something to the people who are hearing them. So often, so for example, you said, you know, these guys, they're throwing F slur this, F slur that. I'm not offended by these words. It's just Twitch. They throw them around like this or like that, you know. And whether or not you want to shut down people in your social circle that engage in that behavior, I think that's a personal decision. Whether or not you want to reach them in another way, that's something that you have to decide for yourself. I know sometimes that shutting that down and especially as kids can be really helpful because getting that little shock and that burst of social stigmatization can keep people from doing things that they find socially unacceptable. But I
totally understand. These aren't kids though. These
right?
Are
no. Yeah,
these are dudes my age and slightly younger. You know what I mean?
And dudes that age probably aren't going to have their entire philosophy on queer people being changed by being scolded on language use. So instead, you focus on an axis, an approach that is more. There's more synthesis that can be arrived at there. Maybe that's not the case for everyone, but that's necessary. That process is necessary.
This is at the core of my labor advocacy right now. I think that you talk a lot about material conditions, right? I think the material conditions for a brand new labor movement in this country have never been better than they are right now. There's a book that's sitting here with me called Death in the Haymarket by James Green. I recently read this book. I'm on my second read through and I'm marking up a physical copy of it.
How much did they pay you to shill it?
I'm not shilling it at all. I'm not. Yeah, I wish they would. James Green, get at me. I'll shill your book for you. I am. I have to be a capitalist. I can't. I have to live.
Trying to pay rent.
Death in the Haymarket. Death in the Haymarket is a really elucidating book. Do you know anything about the Haymarket affair post Civil War?
No, honest to God.
Okay. No. Okay, so good. Then I honestly think you would, and those in your audience that have never heard about it, would benefit from, if not reading this book, then upping your IQ on the Haymarket affair. We're talking about the first labor movement. You're going to love this shit, Vaush. The first labor movement in America, right? The first organized labor movement in America. This started to happen in post-Civil War America because there was this huge upswing in industrial capacity in America after the Civil War. And it was like insatiable amounts of labor were needed. And at that time, the city of Chicago was the center of the labor universe, right? At least in the United States, and one could argue globally. And it had this massive influx of, get this shit, European immigrants, right, that were literal, unabashed, unapologetic socialists and anarchists, came to Chicago and started agitating for the 8-hour workday, right? So that's what this story is about. The Haymarket affair was a bombing. So to put it very bluntly, there was a labor demonstration that was totally peaceful, and this demonstration happened one day after the cops had busted up a similar peaceful demonstration and killed a couple of laborers that were there, right? And so the Haymarket affair was an attempt by the local anarchist labor leaders to have a peaceable assembly and to marshal their labor force against violence. The cops showed up in force. Somebody, nobody knows who, threw a dynamite bomb into the center of the police force, and all hell broke loose. The police shot themselves. They shot indiscriminately laborers on all sides, and the burgeoning labor movement took a huge hit because the media and the politicians immediately abandoned them. After this happened, the media ran with the narrative that radical fucking anarchists from Europe throw bomb at police officers, mayhem in the Haymarket, and basically the politicians ran with it. The media ran with it, and it was a huge blow to what was a huge burgeoning labor movement in this fucking country, which eventually, it took it years to recover from, eventually led to things like the end of child labor, the 8-hour workday, the 40-hour work week, et cetera. Right. So this is something that every leftist that's an American needs to fucking know about, because we are at a time now where, in my opinion, the material conditions are ripe. They're very similar to the times that they were in this book. Huge demand for labor, things being run by these giant oligarchs. Jay Gould and fucking Rockefeller own 90% of all the transportation and the industry. You have no way to advocate for yourself except by hitting the fucking streets. So I feel like we're entering this time again. And the pandemic only underscored that, in my opinion.
The thing that makes this so difficult, I think, is that it's so difficult to coordinate people around economic injustice these days. So, for example, like Black Lives Matter, it's been around for years, but it was George Floyd's murder that really kicked off the huge spike in protests and even in public support. For a time after the murder of George Floyd, even conservative pundits were saying, yeah, that was a murder, and then somebody mentioned the fentanyl thing, and now they stand by that till their dying day. And once the protests kick off, of course, there's a violent element to these protests. All major protests have rioters. This is how every movement has ever worked. And some buildings, they catch a fire. Media throws a hizzy about it. Public support goes down.
There's always a dollar amount attached to it too.
Yeah, so
you know what I mean. You notice that,
which is always a fraction of how much the local police department pays out in settlements following like cases against them too. So,
and an absolute fraction of the damage done in people's lives that live in these economically depressed areas.
yeah, a bit of an aside, by the way. I recently did some math on what a settlement would look like to repay Black Americans for the total amount of unpaid labor that they engaged in over the course of slavery, and it's higher than the world's GDP, even using conservative estimates of labor, pay, interest, everything. So, in terms of overall damage done here, we're talking infinitesimally small fractions of the injustice being protested. But
Sure.
with the economic thing, with the economic problem, with George Floyd, you get a murder you see it everywhere on TV, on YouTube. People are going to get mad about that. For economic stuff, we had the Panama Papers. We just had this IRS leak showing that all the richest men in America don't pay shit. Nobody is getting out and protesting this stuff because it's not as visceral. It's not as immediate as a person, having their last breath choked from them by a knee on national television. It's
Right.
so difficult to get people to reflect on how immediately necessary economic reform is, because that kills people too. Economic reform bears out death in a myriad ways, from all of the conditions associated with poverty that slowly kill people, or quickly kill people sometimes. It's really, really tough to do that. And I think that if the left is to succeed in this country, we're going to need to find some kind of agitating incident to incite that level of protesting,
Well, if for me, the pandemic may have been that time, and the idea, the pressure that was put on what we called, what do we call them? Not necessary.
the essential workers.
Essential. Thank
Right.
you.
Essential work.
Essential workers, right? So we relied so heavily on these people to show up and work with no hazard pay in one of the most scary fucking environments you can possibly think about. These people's labor was invaluable. So for me, labor needs to be the message of the left, because I hate to say it, identity politics ain't doing it. From what I've seen, I'm not talking about everything that falls under the umbrella of identity politics, but as far as like reaching people on the right, reaching people at the political center, ID poll is just not doing it. 100% not taking care of business. Labor could,
I mean,
in my opinion.
If you look at the metrics and the rates at which people adopt progressive positions, it seems like Americans are moving leftward on identity-based issues way faster than we are on economic issues. Like, in terms of, like, support for unionization, the numbers flatline. Like, they really haven't gone up that much. In terms of support for, like, trans people or something like that, it seems like the numbers have skyrocketed. But
what actual leftist energy has been put towards trying to actually push a pro-labor message versus the leftist energy that's been, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I love trans people. I'm glad that they're more accepted. I don't think it's an issue that radical leftists or people on the left should drop. I'm not advocating that you drop caring about these people. I'm not advocating that you drop taking these people's backs when they need it. That's not what I'm advocating for at all. What I'm advocating for is learning how to speak to people that, for a lot of them, those topics are a fucking non-starter, because there is no way for us to organize simply just leftist workforces. No such thing exists, right? People are mixed in with people, politics, are different. You work, these big Amazon warehouses are basically just turnover factories. You never know who's working in them.
Oh, yeah.
People last an average of 3 months there. My wife actually worked at an Amazon fulfillment center for 3 years. And the stories she tells break my fucking heart.
The main issue to me, it seems, is just that liberals are willing to work with us on progressive issues, but not as much on economic issues. Now, of course, we have the PRO Act, that passed through the House. There is some impetus for labor or for economic reform that people are acting on, at least maybe more so than you would have seen back during, like, the Bush or Clinton era. Things are getting a bit better. Even Obama, was relatively to the right of some of the positions that Democrats seem more comfortable throwing their weight behind these days. I agree with you that pushing along class lines is really, 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 really important. The only concern that I have is the idea that, and you didn't say this, so this could be me reading what you said or into what you said some very stupid arguments I've heard from other people, but the concern I have is some people think that the push for what you call identity politics is somehow pushing people away from the left. That by advocating for like,
so you talk about woke scolds a lot, right?
Well, sure.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about leading with the hard, aggressive identity politics foot when you're trying to break bread with people on a labor issue and trying to find common ground and find a way to marshal our strength as a labor force.
Sure, and I disagree with those
by the
types,
way, at the time of the Haymarket Affair was what was happening. Karl Marx and Engels were giving direct orders to the International, which had set up multiple different types of chapters in Chicago at this time. So this is a time when theory was alive, right?
No, of course,
and
of course.
It was labor, class consciousness. So Why would that not work now?
So first of all, I agree that there are people who push for identity politics in ways which are probably detrimental to our broader message. But I feel like most of the time that pushing for them is generally beneficial to us, because one of the easiest ways that people fall down like the hardline right wing is by not being exposed to certain social conditions early on in their life. If you grow up in an environment where you're never taught like anything progressive, it's very unlikely that you're going to turn 25 and then get introduced to a good union argument, and that's going to move you over to the left. It's about intersectionality, right? It's about throwing as many like entry points to the left as possible at a person while they're growing up. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of like all the queer representation these kids shows, right? Not only is it representative of human experience, because there are queer kids, you know, that's a real thing that actually exists, but it's also like, I feel like that can be a way to press on a person's buttons early on in ways that might make them more amicable to progressive ideas further along in the future. I'm not saying that this is the only thing we should focus on. I'm only saying that I don't think a push for intersectionality is detrimental to us. It's to our benefit.
No, I think including intersectionality arguments into class arguments, because when you lift up the laboring class, you lift up trans people, you lift up POCs, you lift up the LGBTQIA rainbow that now looks like a circle with a triangle. Have you covered this at all? The new LGBTQ
I've seen the most
flag?
recent flag. Yes, it's.
I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan.
I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little busy, but whatever. It's not my job to make the flag, so whatever. I'll go with it. I'll fly it if I have to. But it's a little ugly. The flag we made.
We made
saying the flag.
Oh,
you guys made your own. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll have to check that out. Anyway, if we lead with that foot. Like I said, so to bring it back, and this is anecdotal, to bring it back to the conversation I had with my cousins, which admittedly I had a foot in the door because I grew up with the guys. So they're going to listen to what I say. They might just not listen to what somebody else has to say. But for me, it's all about presentation. Had I gotten all puffed up when they slurred me into oblivion, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that was bad was gay and this, that, and the other thing, that conversation would have been over for the day. And we would have moved on to stupid pleasantries like, how are the wife? How are the kids? What are you up to? See you later.
Right.
But we actually had a fruitful conversation where these dudes that were like super Trumpites agreed with me on a couple of points. One of them was labor and the need for a new national labor movement so that people unionize and take back their power, because these are unionized right wingers. Keep in mind, very useful people, I think, to us in skirting around some of the issues that you're talking about when it comes to unionizing right-wing labor forces.
As long as they push for the same things I push for.
They also agreed with me on climate change. Do you agree that the clock is ticking there?
Look, I think the clock has ticked, to be honest.
Right.
I feel if it's not ticking anymore, I feel like that's because it hit midnight and we're just waiting for reality to catch up with us. So
have you been red pilled on lethal wet bulb temperature?
I do not know what lethal wet bulb temperature is, but I wasn't done responding to the previous thing.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I'm trying to move on too quickly. Go right ahead.
No,
sir.
I just want to say I am completely in favor of like a multi-plurality or a plurality of approaches towards moving people over to the left. I feel like a lot of people are on the right for like block issues, you know? If you're a homophobe,
ridiculous reasons, if you're honest.
right, but if you're like a homophobe, you're more likely to be a transphobe. And if you're a homophobe and a transphobe, you're more likely to be like anti-choice. And if you're a homophobe, a transphobe, and anti-choice, you're more likely to listen to the kinds of people who will also tell you that that COVID is fake. And if you believe all those things, you're probably more likely to listen to people who tell you that that the Marxist far left wants to give everyone the same income, and that, Mao Zedong Biden is trying to steal your paycheck or something. When you split people from the ideological hegemonies that they belong to, I think they become more amicable to all the arguments that you can make.
What do you think about depoliticizing our argument in furtherance of that goal?
It depends on the argument, like for which positions.
So, not to move you along too fast, I want to give you, I know I interrupted you in the midst of a thought, so I want to give you a chance to finish what you had to say and respond to it if I need to, or if you'd like me to. But
sure.
Go ahead.
No, the only point that I'm making here is that I feel like it's important to attack like holistically. The right understands this, which is why the politicians, they focus on this huge plurality of issues to move people over. But you know what they don't talk about? They don't talk about class that much. Very rarely do they talk about taxes, apart from when they want to lower them, but they still get tens of millions of people advocating for right-wing economic policies. And how do they do it? They talk about trans bathroom bills. If you move people over on issue X or Y, you don't even need to make the argument for issue Z.
And then contact hypothesis has a chance to come into effect in the labor space.
Yeah, they do.
Do you agree that in the labor space, contact hypothesis, having to work with a trans person that you might hate their fucking guts, right? Because they are who they are, but they're a fellow laborer, and under the auspices of a union, if you elevate them, you elevate yourself besides. You put more turkey on your table, right?
Oh, 100%.
And that means that you work together with that person. That means that person may stand up and have a grievance with you that you have to address before the union, which makes you more likely to listen to that person and not judge them just on their appearance or the knowledge that they're trans or their outward transness or their openness about being trans, right?
Yeah. The only caveat, but I completely agree with everything that you've said. The only caveat that I have to that is that if you have a trans person working in a union with people who are not necessarily pro-trans, first of all, good on that trans person. Seems stressful. Good luck, But if that's the environment that they're going to be in, when they stand up against transphobia from the people around them, if people make insensitive comments or are outright rude and prejudiced, that trans person standing up to them cannot be interpreted as some divisive, anti-unity, why won't you just shut up and let us all be in the union together type deal.
I'm not necessarily talking about, organizing these largely right-wing spaces and hypothesizing a trans person might be sprinkled.
But I'm just saying, in the most extreme example, we must maintain that while contact theory is great and valid and we should work together on shared goals, we cannot treat marginalized people trying to maximize the comfortability of their environments as a detriment to our goal of engaging in contact theory, because that's part of the process. You can't do contact theory by getting people together in a union and having all the marginalized people shut up about the racism, the sexism. You do it by having them talk about it, and eventually people mold their positions over to, well, whatever fits the group thing, really.
Or you don't talk to them about it at all. Like, were you ever homophobic? Were you lucky enough to be raised by parents that didn't fill your mind with that poison?
I was never homophobic, no.
Very, very cool of your parents. You should thank them for that. Because too. Well, I'm just saying, me being an older dude, it was way more common to be raised in casually homophobic households. It's why I was closeted until I was 38 years old. It's why I didn't feel comfortable coming out as a bisexual dude until I was 38. Because I was raised in a hugely oppressive anti-homosexual environment. And so I'm talking about people that still hold that fucking stupid position. And what won it over for me was not a gay person coming over and going, let's talk about homosexuality and let's fucking suss it out. It was my parents being progressive, I guess, enough, they were union workers, to invite a very flamboyantly gay man, black man, over to our house for routine after work drinking because they happened to be on the same shift as him. His name was Demas. Rest in peace. He died of HIV, as so many people did in the 80s and 90s. Demas came to my house as a very openly effeminate presenting gay person, and was the first exposure that I had to an openly gay person, and showed me that gay people were not the things that my parents were telling me that they were.
Yeah, exposure.
They were not these.
That's the point of the TV shows
exposure
too.
to him was was what challenged my preconceived homophobic notions that had been drilled into me. Right.
Right. And that the process of exposure is essential, because, you know, you get told gay people are like these crazy, degenerate, pedophile sodomites, and then you see one and they're just like a guy. That's important. Right. The only thing I maintain, they can't be made to tolerate abuse without or be threatened with the accusation like you're being divisive, you're threatening unity. Because this is what pisses me off. I call these people class reductionists. There's writing on this, but there are people who say, like, if you're trans or if you're gay and you're on the left, that's fine. But it's your responsibility to shut up, okay? Just be quiet. Don't make a fuss, because you're pushing away all of our target demographic, the white working class, the presumed conservative white working class. And if you're loud, if you advocate for your rights, if you say things that aren't hegemonically acceptable, then you get, well, then you're standing in our way. You're opposed to the revolution now. Now, you're not saying that because you're in favor of Pride being a protest and the gay kids cartoons and shit. So that's not what you're saying. But as long as none of these people are expected to tolerate abuse, I'm completely in favor of that. Though, admittedly, I got to say,
what if
you're trans?
Let me ask you a question. Let me play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
What if, with courage, they did tolerate abuse for furtherance of a leftist cause? What if they went in with the idea of, I'm walking into a place that is going to hate me from the get-go, but through exposure and joining their union, they're going to see me as not, you know, whatever it is, whatever their take is on trans folk. You know, they're going to see me as a fellow worker. They're going to have to talk to me because I'm in the labor space with them. So I'm not asking any trans person to undergo this, or any gay person, because this could be for anybody on the LGBTQIA spectrum, you know, could do this.
If a person wants to quietly tolerate, like, the bigotry of their coworkers in an effort to be the first good exposure they've had to your demographic, that's their right. I'd never ask that of anyone, and I feel like that could be very detrimental to people's physical and mental health given the conditions there, you know? Now, I will say, though...
What if you annulled yourself and prepared yourself for that? Like Daryl Davis, right? You've heard of Daryl Davis and, you know...
Yeah, but I want to steelman your case, though, because one of the places this happens most often is women in upper management. If you're a woman, a feminist, I'm not saying, you know, you're some, like, stodgy 1980s business mom, but if you're a feminist woman and you get into upper management, you have to recognize, if you're being super, like, outwardly feminist and, like, very aggressive and confronting all the problems with your workplace, maybe you do good. Most often you get fired or demoted or relegated into irrelevancy. So you play this careful game. You work within the system, you stay strong, you deal with the shit that you need to until you're capable of changing the system around you. Now, that sucks. Right. That's not fair, but sometimes that does produce good outcomes. I'd never be mad at a person for not wanting to do that, though.
No, neither would I. I would never prescribe that. My idea would be to unionize these largely vibrant already environments like retail and grocery stores and Uber drivers and delivery drivers and truck, you know what I mean? The, like, non-Teamster affiliated, you know, trucking outfits and shit like that. People that already have a wide rainbow of people working for them to use, you know, I don't know, dude, I feel like a boomer talking to your audience because I still speak from the 90s. So whatever, a coalition of folk. Right, a coalition of different kinds of folks sprinkled amongst the workforce. Right.
Can I say one other thing too? I apologize.
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to say,
no, it's okay.
Even in those environments, especially these days, you know, unless you're part of some sort of, like, rural Louisianian, you know, construction firm, I feel like for the most part, say you're like a trans lady, you know, and you're working as part of a union, unless people are being outwardly hateful towards you, I feel like often you can have conversations with people civilly, you know. because often there is this weird political dissonance that people have where they will hate a group but like a member of that group. We've all heard this before. Like, racist people will say he's one of the good ones. Who here, Chad, I'm asking you, who here had parents who were some kind of bigoted, but they knew someone from the group they were bigoted against, and they were like, oh, well, not this one. No, that's Gregory. That's Gregory. Gregory's fine. I just mean the group. Exactly. People, yeah, me too. And by the way, well, my parents were never bigoted, but I knew adults who were like that when I was growing up. And the reason for that is because, well, people are really, really dumb, and they want to hold on to their stereotypes in spite of contrary evidence. But if you're in one of those environments where you're treated well, but they still hold prejudice against the group that you're a part of, what Paul's advocating for here, and I think I agree with this broadly, is that like a preachy or directly confrontational approach against that bigotry, that's not always the most effective approach. Not just for the group, but for you. That sometimes just being there and being like cool, and if they say something a little off or insensitive, you can be like, yeah, well, oh, like if you're a trans woman, like, oh yeah, no, it's not like, I don't really consider it like a disability. It's just, you know, it's how I feel. Like that kind of thing. It can make a...
Sure. I want to take time to just double down and make sure that people understand that I am not prescribing this to trans folk or anybody. That is not your purview as a person to absorb fucking abuse. Let me tell you the difference, right? I was at neutral ground when I was having this conversation with my cousins. Mm-hmm. Had they been in my household, there is an absolute unbreakable rule in my household. When you're on what is considered to be my property, you're in my domicile, you live by my motherfucking rules. That means no bigotry, no transphobia, no gay phobia, no use of the F slur, none of that bullshit. So I'm totally fine with you keeping yourself the way that you want to keep yourself. I never, ever want to act like I'm prescribing to trans people or anybody to do this. But I'm just saying, for us as leftists to ignore the value of this is to ignore our ability to make converts of people whose whole fucking stupid, anti-gay, bigoted, racist ideology is based on the flimsiest of the flimsy, right? And this is a way to kind of introduce them in a way that they normally might not be introduced to people of color, to people on the LGBTQ spectrum, whatever, right? Yeah, I think if we ignore this, we do so at our own peril because the fucking clock is ticking. We don't have time. Like there's this shit I wanted to move onto with the climate. I won't inundate you with it, but I'd like to make a point about that.
No, yeah, I just to cap this off, I just want to say the project of building shared social spaces with people that we disagree with in an effort to move them over to our positions is literally what my channel is about. I think anyone who's watched me for any length of time can understand that, and I've talked about that so many times. It is an unfortunate and tedious and difficult process, and the thing that sucks the most about it is that it's harder for us than for them, because it's not like conservative entryism spaces are like difficult for white straight men. It's not like white cis guys are going into predominantly, like white cis Republican dudes are going into like predominantly progressive areas and being discriminated against for being white cis, like that. The reverse isn't as potentially damaging to them. It's difficult, but right. It needs to be talked about. Yeah.
So adjacent to this, with immigration, by the way, such a hot topic, and what a disappointment Biden has been on that front. It's about to get worse. So lethal wet bulb temperature is starting to crop up in places more frequently and more intensely than scientists thought before. Lethal wet bulb temperature is basically the human body's cooling system is sweat, right? Well, when you combine a certain heat index with a certain humidity index, the body's natural ability to cool itself shuts down, right?
Right.
Because, you know, cooling yourself with sweat no longer works, and you become overheated incredibly quickly. So the outside becomes unlivable. So this is starting to happen in coastal areas around the equatorial belt of this country, by the way, which happens to be the home for about 40% of the global population, give or take 5 or 10%. You know what I mean? Depending on how broad a swath you look at. So we're talking about 40% of people in the next 30, 40 years, conservatively, being functionally unable to work outside, thus unable to really sustain themselves where they're living, and they're going to be moving north and south, right?
Yeah.
So the crisis at the border, we're already seeing this. I myself am a climate refugee of sorts, right? I had money, so I was able to move with a U-Haul and shit. So I'm not a refugee, but I'm just saying I fled Louisiana primarily because in 2020, I was in the path of 8 major storms in an area that was functionally underwater, right? Below sea level. So it's like, fuck this. That was, by the way, the record in that area. Broke the record from the year prior, 2019, which I also lived in Louisiana through, which had 6 storms. So I'm not alone in this. People are already starting within our own country to flee these coastal areas that have become inundated with these more and more powerful storms and these more and more unlivable wet bulb temperatures. And this is going to be more pronounced the closer to the equator you are. And that is home to about 40% of the Earth's population. So there's going to be a mass migration crisis. And there's no leftist talking about this that I'm aware of. And this is something that we have to start preparing for because, look, if the current situation is left as is, there will be deaths at the border. There will be military action against the masses of people trying to come to this country.
Yeah, this is one of the catalysts for revolutionary action that I've talked about because I feel like that's the ticking time bomb, right? So let's be super selfish for a second and say we only care about American political action, you know? Sure. Which conditions would be most likely to lead to some kind of drastic political uprising, you know? And to me,
massive influx of people.
Yes, the easiest one by far would be a fascist government rising to power after we see geopolitical unrest following a mass influx of climate refugees. That to me is like a very easy, very straightforward thing that we're going to have to deal with. As people from parts of Central America continue to move northward, nobody wants them. Mexico's not going to want them. None of these countries are going to want them. Nobody wants hundreds of millions of refugees. Nobody can handle hundreds of millions of refugees. So they're going to find themselves at border after border after border, and people are going to want to come to the U.S. The U.S. is farther north than Mexico is. Also, we're a very wealthy country, and there are just going to be mass graves along the southern border. Easy.
There already are.
No, right. I mean, it's going to be a moat of a mass grave that connects
you're right.
the two seas to each other. It's going to be a second Panama Canal filled with corpses if things don't change before that time. And I do not think things are going to change before that time. This just seems like something that's going to happen.
Let's look at Europe. Just think about the North African immigration and the Middle Eastern immigration into Europe because of this.
It was like,
think about that for a second.
It was like 5 million people, and it set the entire continent towards like right-wing ethno-nationalism.
Let me go ahead and, because I know you have other things you want to get to, and I don't want to keep you all day. Let me get to the thing that's really probably going to lose any goodwill that I've developed with your audience. Although I hope
get the roller coaster effect, get us right up to the point, and then plummet.
Unless you have something else to say on these other topics, of course. I don't want to move things along faster.
Just that it feels like we're doomed. The thing is, though, because there is an optimism balancing this out, I actually have an unbelievable amount of faith in humanity in terms of our ability to overcome challenges if we work towards it. It seems like every time like wartime runs around, or every time there's like a really big goal we want to set ourselves towards, like the space race, we do like stupidly sick shit in like no time at all. Like, once the money and resources and will are put towards it, it's just like W after W after W. We win. But you gotta work towards it. And at the moment, we are globally contributing like 1/100th of the necessary resources and manpower towards dealing with this. But if something changes and we all decide to start doing this, I genuinely believe we can avert a crisis, save billions of people. I do believe this. If we do that, I
agree. No, I totally agree. I don't think it necessarily has to be like that. I think that the best thing that we can do with our time is to immediately focus ourselves as leftists on this problem, because we know it's the doom at our doorstep. We know that we have to organize labor. We know that we have to somehow reach across the aisle in our own fucking sphere. Like, look, as much as I would love to be able to influence international politics, my best bet at doing that is trying to change the way that the United States operates, right? I'm a citizen of the United States. I vote here. By the way, let me start with that. I'm a voter now. Yay, Paul. Yay. I vote now. I vote local initiatives, state level initiatives. Any candidate locally that is not DNC or RNC affiliated, I vote for. And, you know, what I've kind of been advocating for people who feel like me to do, and also trying to sell as a possible way forward, is this idea of a no confidence vote, right? So a no confidence vote as it's applied in a parliamentary system is obviously different than what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a vote of no confidence for us as leftists and hopefully the liberals that we bring with us in the DNC, because it's the DNC that I believe acts as the goalkeeper for leftist ideals, right? It's they that make sure that the mix in fucking the House is always in flux and only has just a smattering of progressives in it. It's they that make sure that Bernie Sanders is scuttled not one but two fucking, you know, electoral cycles in a row. And it's they that put forward the absolute vanilla slurping weirdo that is Joe Biden. I'm sorry to, you know what I mean? He's just a weirdo.
Can't believe you would. Can't believe you would shit talk vanilla ice cream like that.
I love vanilla ice cream, but man, Joe Biden makes me want to hate it. You just seeing him slurp it, I just hate it. I hated the Biden ice cream cone slurping memes, but that's the least of my problems with him. He can slurp all the goddamn ice cream he wants. But okay, so for me, a no confidence vote is about undermining the DNC. Do you see the DNC as an opponent? Do you think the DNC can be reformed from within in the time? By the way, keep in mind the ticking time bomb that we talked about earlier. You know, mass migration, climate change, etc.
Can I really quickly use the restroom? I'm going to really quickly use the restroom. I'm going to be right back.
I'm going to do the same. I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. So I'll be right back as well.
I'll be right back.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Is he gone? Did we do it? Did we dodge the tough question? Are we free? Are we safe? Oh. I don't know how he did that. How'd he do that? What? Well, he's streaming too, right? I should be peeping at his chat while he peeps at mine. The double stream chat. Yeah, there it is. Ideology. The double stream chat peep is an essential component of two people talking to each other. Wait, damn, dude. Wait, I can't tell if their chat's joking or if they actually don't like me. What? Oh no. Wait, can they hear you? Yeah, the call's still open, yeah. I can't tell if it's a joke. I think they're actually like accusing me of dodging. Oh no. Oh dear. Oh no. Well, we like you? Okay, that's not true. You guys do not like me, okay? You tolerate me. Oh, now they're saying they love me, but that's probably because you guys all invaded their chat. The only people who I can really trust in Paul's chat are the mods, because I know that they're not you guys.
My chat is typically a disaster, so I take no responsibility for their input.
So noted.
Um.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that leftists are the cancer and that the Democrat body is the giant aging wildebeest, basically. That's what I think. Can it be reformed? Probably not. I think they're a gigantic political body that we need to leech resources from as quickly as possible so that we can become strong enough, maybe to become independent ourselves. I don't know if the Democrat Party is ever going to be like some advocate for genuine progressive reform. Almost certainly not. I sincerely doubt that's the case. I definitely prefer the wildebeest to the lion. Or I don't even know what the Republican Party would be.
But at what point? So let me stop you there and ask you: at what point do we jump off the carcass of the aging, cancerous, limping wildebeest that's slowly being devoured by the lions?
Well, we never should fully, right? There should always be the cancer because we could always use them for more resources until they're dead.
Well, okay. So how do we aid their passing?
I would say, well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to make third parties viable. We need to address.
How do you do that in a two-party binary?
Well, the Democrats there are people in the Democrat Party which have at times proposed significant voter reform. It's becoming more and more popular. Unfortunately, this is an electoral barrier. Unless we implement ranked choice voting or something similar to it, I don't think it's possible for anything from that point forward to succeed. Because, there are two roads to take here, electoral and revolutionary. At the moment, the leftists just do not have the numbers. There's just, the mechanisms for revolutionary activity aren't here. Protests, yes. Mass worker advocacy, yes. But literally taking over the U.S. government, right now I think this is a fantasy. So the best thing that we can do...
No, I totally agree with you there. I'm not advocating for us to... I've been called a tanky, by the way. Can I say... Can I say gross, please? No, I'm not a tanky. Can you guys please stop calling me a tanky, please?
You're nowhere near enough of a status to even be in the same ballpark.
Oh my God, I'm the opposite of a status. I'm for the abolition of all borders and the opening of the world to commerce and travel for everyone.
Based.
Yeah.
So I think the real stopgap is the first past the post voting system, and I don't think that we can realistically break off from the Democratic Party until that happens. Once that happens, and it's possible, it can be done, that's not impossible. Once that can be done, and it's going to be easier to do the more we have control of the Democrat Party, of course, because we can control that discourse. Once that happens, we can engage in entryism while bolstering our own parties. We push up our parties as much as we can, and then the Democrats, they're no longer what we have to do. Now they're the side vote because it's better than fascism, and the more and more and more we leech off of them, power and numbers, the more likely it is that we get a seat at the table. Maybe we don't get control of the presidency ever, but we might be able to get a significant wedge of Congress and the Senate. Probably just the House. And if we can do that, at this point now, we have the ability to bargain or to leverage bargains from other people.
Have the squad, in your opinion, lived up to the reason for their name yet?
I generally like what they've done, yeah. I know there's a lot of criticism that they get.
Weren't they called the squad because they were supposed to vote as a block in a slim margin house to force more leftist ideas to be included and piggybacked off of these more liberal bills? I think in a slim margin house, right?
I think the problem with that is that it's like there's no real incentive because I don't think the Democratic Party actually cares whether or not they do anything useful. So it's like
that's the problem, right? Because the DNC is about oppressing whatever they would do.
No, I agree, but
that's an agenda that doesn't include them.
It's a sound idea. The problem is it presumes that the Democratic Party actually cares about making this country better, and I don't believe that's the case. Maybe
I don't believe that's the case either. I do not believe that's the case either.
Maybe if the Democratic Party was more beholden to the population that it meant to represent, maybe if there were more left-leaning people who were elected, maybe if, and here's the thing I'm really looking towards, maybe if the rhetoric, people like AOC and Ilhan Omar catches on a little bit more, they use this rhetoric about representing the people, really taking to task, getting the job done, stuff like this, maybe Democrats start to ask more of their representatives. And if you can do that, you start to seed real political pressure. Because while the Democrats may not care about getting anything good done, they do care about keeping progressives from taking over the party. They care about that very, very much.
So we have to get them out of the way, right?
Exactly. But we have to do that with rhetoric, and it has to be a very careful process. We have very little time, but we also have very little margin for error. Because
you talked earlier about a third party, though. So how do we establish a third party and still give deference to the DNC?
Well, that'd be after we pass a reform to first past the post voting, right? And that's at least a decade away.
Who's going to do that? Like, how is that? Like,
if you're asking me
for the amount of time that we have to deal with the looming climate crises,
if you're asking me
economic crises
for an optimistic assessment of our political situation, then I can't provide one.
Well, then open your mind to mine then, at least. And I'm not saying you're being closed-minded. You're actually hearing me out, and your chat is being pretty decent about it. But listen, the DNC to me is the enemy. It's the DNC that has gatekept most. So you've probably heard of the ratchet effect, right? The idea that the right wing always pushes
the right, the Democrat keeps it from moving to the left, yeah.
Right. And so everything slowly but surely, especially when it comes to class issues, ratchets itself to the right, right? We have to break that mechanism somehow. And the ratchet, which prevents movement back to the left, is the DNC. And their constant, like you realize, like the infrastructure package that's being debated right now
and
was
whittled down, yeah.
It was it was like whittled down to make it more acceptable. So it wasn't even really like presented as a full leftist package. It was whittled down as presented, and now it's being further made into Swiss cheese, right? So that's what happens. So let me make something, and I'm not trying to be accusatory to you. Here's what I fear. You're a very popular dude. A lot of people watch you. A lot of young leftists watch you, right?
Yeah.
And I fear that when it comes to the actual real world advocacy of your channel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, setting aside the awesome, what was it, $200 plus thousand you raised, right?
That's
for Palestinian kids, right? I fear that your advocacy has done, up until this point, as I've been aware of you, steered young, vibrant, passionate leftists into neoliberal action, having them vote for the D instead of the R by fear-mongering the R. And I understand there's a lot to fear in the Republican Party. I think there's an almost equal amount to fear in the fucking Democratic Party.
I would strongly disagree with that.
Okay, well,
even if all I do is get people, even if all I do is get people who otherwise wouldn't vote to vote Democrat, I consider that to be a positive effect on the world. The problem
Fair
is
enough. There
aren't very many outlets for like leftist change at the moment, because all of the systems that are used to affect change are basically gatekept from us. So all we can really do until that situation changes is affect the kind of rhetoric and political advocacy that would make those systems more amicable to our participation, which is happening slowly. More and more leftist rhetoric is getting normalized in the Democrat Party. It's slow, and it's frustratingly slow, but it's more than we had a decade ago. And the DSA membership has skyrocketed since Trump's presidency. That's been good. There are some metrics of positive change. But as for the alternative, well, say you have my platform, what would you be telling them?
So what are you asking me again?
What would you be telling them? If I'm an advocacy for neoliberal activism, what would the alternative, the preferable alternative be in this case?
Advocacy within leftist spaces against neoliberalism directly,
like
by
what
starving, by attempting to starve the DNC of votes, to make them irrelevant, to weaken the beast, to weaken the wildebeest further, so to speak, so that we can move ourselves closer.
How would that move us closer?
Establishing some of the third party viability that you talked about at the beginning of this.
Well, we realistically, without a change in the first past the post voting system, we're never going to have a third party that's going to overtake the Democrat Party. At best, we would split votes between them, and it would lead to the Republicans winning every election, right? We do need that, like, institutional change.
If the Republicans win every election, wouldn't that weaken the DNC in the minds of people who were traditional, kind of like neolibs?
I mean, it would really...
Wouldn't that like force them to think about the idea of possibly establishing a new...
I think it would mostly...
worker representative party, or a Labor Party, or a People's Party, or...
mostly make them despise us, because we would be at fault. we would have like cynically destroyed the Democrat Party and guaranteed Republican wins for the next 40 years just because we were willing to work within the system.
The Democrat Party continues to cynically destroy us.
And
people the people in the global South that we all benefit from the labor of.
Well, I mean, America destroys people in the global South. The Democrat and Republican parties both do that just fine.
They facilitate it when they're in office. It's business as usual for the
voters don't
factory farms
voters don't care about people in the global South. Voters care about.
I agree.
Their interest
because nobody talks about them.
Well, the Squad does, with to an extent, more so at least than their contemporaries, right? With regards to like what's going to get people to push for these ideas, I really don't think that people are going to be moved leftward by watching leftists give this country to Republicans. I mean, I think that one of the premises here is like there's not that much of a difference in the harm done by Republicans and Democrats, but I strongly disagree with that. There is harm done, and if the Republicans, they keep winning and winning and winning, I think the Democrat Party, it's just going to appeal more to the right in an effort to try to siphon voters over from the actually politically effective group that the Republican Party is pulling from. And then, like, we're out in the water now, too, because we don't even have, like, a wildebeest to leech off of, you know?
I mean, isn't that better? Because the wildebeest that we leech off of supports apartheid in Israel, supports genocide in Syria, supports butchers and war profiteers the world over so long as their economic interests align with ours. We're butt fucking the planet with this industry. The reason, let's not make any bones about it. The reason this lethal wet bulb temperature shit is going to happen, and the reason this giant 40% of the globe is going to be running for the border one way or the other, is because we, when I say we, I mean industrialized society, have royally butt fucked the planet to the point where there's absolutely no, I'm sorry if that's bad on Twitch, royally pooped on the fucking planet to the point where it can't sustain us anymore. So we're talking about the oceans acidifying, right? Mm-hmm. Something like 40 to 50% of breathable oxygen comes from phytoplankton. Phytoplankton rely on a relatively base ocean. The oceans are acidifying at an alarming rate. When you look at the actual science that goes into this, the studies that have come out, the only thing that people back in the 90s that were studying this were wrong about was how fast it would be happening. So it's accelerating. So phytoplankton die, 40% of the breathable oxygen in the fucking atmosphere isn't there. I don't have to paint a more doomer picture than that. We're not just talking about harm reduction anymore. We're literally on the edge of an existential crisis as a species, as a human species. The oceans no longer support life, right?
No, I don't.
There's a study that like it's somewhere in 15 to 20 years, there are going to be zero large ocean fish in the ocean anymore, right? I'm not trying to preach to you like you don't understand this, but I want to understand as a leftist how I'm supposed to fucking like funnel my energy into voting for Joe Biden or putting all my hopes in the Squad and watching the narrative change from screaming at the fucking gate and it's concentration camps to it's a carceral crisis.
I don't talk about the Squad like ever, really.
Right. No, I'm not even pinning that on you. I'm asking you.
But you don't.
How do we move forward when that's the best we can do?
The Squad and Joe Biden, these take a few hours once every 4 years or 2 or whatever. It's an incomparably small portion of your time. Most of what I do,
but a lot of your time is spent fucking talking about that shit, right?
A lot of my time is spent talking about the reasons why it's better to do those things. But in terms of the energy I expend, well, because it is better.
Isn't it self-evident that it's better?
You keep drawing comparisons between the harm Democrats and Republicans do to the world, so I don't know if it's self-evident, or at least not self-evident enough for you, right? Because you disagree with my premise. I think I disagree
with the premise that cyclical lesser of two evils voting is the best that we can fucking do in the face of a crisis that may come to bear in 30 years.
All political advocacy is cyclical lesser of two evils voting. There was never a point where that wasn't the case.
The material conditions will never materialize if we don't capitalize on them, right? So I'm not talking about taking guns out into the streets. I'm talking about a mass labor movement, a mass walkout, something akin to the fucking civil rights movement and the hippie movement and the anti-war movement back in the 60s,
like a general
right?
strike. I think that's awesome. I'm very pro general strike as long as the apparatus is there to organize it.
So, but that's completely and utterly outside of the fucking purview of electoral politics.
Yeah, but I don't.
And
that's the thing.
You just admitted that you spend a lot of your time explaining why that's better. Why don't you spend that time advocating for doing that?
Because the electoral politics shit should have been obvious. I only talked about it so much because there were so many lefties with so many big brain ideas on how you could own the left by letting Republicans win. I never wanted to talk the whole Joe Biden, like voting for Biden is better thing, the whole like Bernie or bust thing. I never wanted that to be a big part of my channel. I was shocked by the attitude other leftists had towards it. My position on this, well, my position on this has always been that of Chomsky. Chomsky, he says, yes, of course, Biden should win. It is preferable to Trump winning. This isn't an expression of your moral activism. It's just something you do to make the world better. You do it, you get it done within one day, and then for the rest of your time, you focus on all the other more important issues. Do
you feel you've done that? Do you feel you live up to that standard? That
standard only makes sense if the rest of the left is on board with you on it, because otherwise, I feel like, yeah, it is responsible.
How's the left ever supposed to get on board with you if nobody of your position is ever fucking presenting the argument?
Well, because we have to settle the easy arguments. I mean, first of all, we can't have Trump win again. We can't do that. We can't let Trump win again. We're so close. We're so unfathomably close. Maybe 40 years from now, we get a fascist government because of the climate refugees. I don't want a fascist government sooner than 40 years from now. I'd like to at least have 40 years to enjoy my life before that kicks in, you know? We can't let that happen again. And we've seen data on this, by the way. People get moved over to the left from seeing the failures of people like Joe Biden, right? You say Joe Biden is doing a bad job right now. He's dropping the ball. I love it. That's my shit. I love seeing that. If all Joe Biden did was rack up easy W's, what's my argument? Oh, Bernie would have done better. And then the Democrat, looks at me and they say like, oh, sure, Bernie would have done better. And they go back to clapping over Biden. No, I want Biden to fail. I want Democrats to become disillusioned in him. Because while it is true that doing direct work and direct activism and union breaking and stuff, this can move over many thousands of people, convincing a broad swath of the Democrat voter base that Joe Biden is not the solution to our problems, that can move over millions. And that's the big W that I'm looking for, right? That's what...
Yeah, so, like, how do we do that?
Because cyclically
what happens is people, like, you understand the back to brunch mentality, right?
Yeah.
There are people that talk like you and I have been doing this whole, like, criticize the lib when they're in office since I was a boy, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a new tactic. And what has it bought us? It's bought us Joe Biden.
Well, first of all, I mean, not every tactic takes is seen out to its benefits immediately, right? We do see benefits though. Bernie Sanders,
right? But it's been 40
Hillary.
years of my life that this hasn't borne out its benefit. And we just agreed that in 30 years, it's possible that the biggest mass migration of people ever is going to happen.
But we're
not prepared for it in any way here. We're not organized as a labor force. We're not unified as leftists because we're not working together. We're not really in good faith trying to reach across the aisle to people who we need to bring over, not just centrists, but Republican people.
But almost everything
we need to snatch these people out from underneath the ridiculous.
Good in this country is a product of that strategy. The Great Society and the
I understand that, but we're on the clock.
Right, we are on the clock.
Not?
But we for the past 2 election cycles nearly had an honest-to-God socialist win in the country responsible for more socialist CIA journalism awards to the back of the head than any has ever existed. We have socialists in office in Congress right now. I feel like you say right now we have radicalizing conditions, that things are being exacerbated. I agree with you. Maybe the clock starts ticking faster on these solutions. Maybe, we're only how many months into Joe Biden? 5 months, I think, into Joe Biden, right? Maybe we tick it out a little bit
20 days.
Yeah, and he fails harder. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. We don't get our health care. We don't get our infrastructure bill. We don't get our $15 an hour minimum wage. And people get disillusioned. And what we have to do is we have to say 2 things. The Democrat Party ain't the solution, but also the Republican Party ain't the solution either. If you want a solution to these problems, the phony populism of the right isn't it for you. You got to come further left. And maybe 2024, maybe 2028, I don't know how much time we have to do this. I just don't think there's a better or
How
faster
much?
way.
I mean, and like, you know, do you agree that at some point revolution has to happen or else, right? The fascism that we're all afraid of, the fascism that we're trying to stave off is winning. It's going to continue to win.
If enough
And at some
people,
point it's going to, right?
if enough people are on the left, there won't be a need to. Fascist revolutions only work if they have a critical mass of the population that's active and participating in overthrowing the government, right?
So
If we're
at what
successful,
point is Joe Biden going to ensure, or any kind of neoliberal candidate going to ensure, a soft landing out of any of the shit we've talked about today on the climate?
well, maybe we don't get a neoliberal candidate next time around, right? Though Joe Biden is better for the climate than like Trump would have been. Trump didn't even acknowledge
you think that
climate change.
you genuinely believe the DNC is going to allow a non-neoliberal candidate to the top of the fucking masthead of the party?
I mean, they clearly were incapable of stopping the kind of political blowback that Bernie Sanders effected with his participation.
The political blowback that led to what?
That led to
beyond conversation. It led to what? Joe Biden, Kamala Harris.
So there are
a largely ineffectual majority in both houses of Congress.
There are wins beyond the presidential victories that we get right now, right? We've gotten dozens of progressive candidates elected in, and we also have, if you take a look at how many Americans support socialism, the number spiked in 2016 and has continued to grow since. The population's attitude towards these ideas, every idea, union support, we see a spike with Bernie Sanders. Progressive ideas, we've been seeing a steady and continual gain for decades now. Very sharp rises. There are benefits to these, right? It's just a matter of waiting to strike when the iron's hot. And maybe it's not
is
hot
that?
enough right
Can you
now.
help me out? And like, I understand you don't have a crystal ball, but when is it? If not now, then when is it? We're in the midst of an unprecedented in modern times global pandemic that killed over 500,000 people here.
Well, what if we...
tons of people were asked to go out into the pandemic-soaked fucking streets to sling you your groceries and bring you your DoorDash and shit, right?
I don't know.
Like, do you think something bigger's coming? Like, when?
I think we have to take advantage of the conditions we have now to exacerbate the timescale, right? So here are some things that are very, very important, okay? First of all, and this is absolutely critical, the Republican Party has to be irrelevant. As long as the Republican Party is this big looming threat on the horizon, Democrats will bend over backwards and support whoever they're told to in order to prevent them from coming into office.
What got knocked off the national platform?
Huh?
What got knocked off the national platform that Joe Biden promised and didn't deliver to people? And you think this is going to somehow engender leftist fucking, like...
Wait, one thing at a time. Not leftist necessarily, but dissatisfaction
people
with
to move to
neoliberalism.
your side as you're pom-pomming the people that promise them shit and give them nothing?
That happened with Obama, yeah. After 8 years of Obama, there was... Well, think about it. Well, wait, think about
Trump.
it. Well, hold on. We got Trump, that's true. But who do we get from the Democrats? Out of nowhere, we get this independent senator who captures the heart of the country, gets tens of millions of people at least engaged in relative left entryism, and skyrockets every metric we have for awareness to class consciousness. Bernie Sanders, man.
Butt fucked.
People, he didn't win, that's true, but where you're older than me. In 2001, when Bush had a 90% approval rating after 9/11 and was drumming up support for an invasion in the Middle East, would you have ever believed that in just 15 years, an honest-to-God, Latin American-supporting, Castro-praising socialist would just come in a narrow second in the Democratic primary? Could you have even fathomed that back then?
Probably not. But I mean, functionally, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference if the same neoliberal stuffed suit is in office that was when I was a kid? Then what's the difference? Yeah, he came close. Do you think he's going to come closer next time? The DNC. Do you agree that the DNC did everything in its power to make sure that Bernie Sanders was not successful, both in 2016 and in 2020?
I definitely think that the Democratic Party made an effort to present Hillary and Biden as like the electable candidates, the more sensible candidates, that they had plenty of ways to influence the ways in which these processes took place. They basically admitted that they don't actually have to follow the rules. Primary elections are, after all, not federally regulated. You can do basically whatever you want.
So we're going to sneak a socialist through the DNC? How? When they have all the power?
Well, there are different levels of conspiracism, right? What if next time, what if in 2024, we have a big, another big socialist, let's call them Schmurny Schmanders, right? They come through, and this person, they're hugely popular. They get more votes than the other candidate. Is the Democrat Party really going to just say, oh, well, they got more votes, but we're picking the other one? You know what? I hope they do. Because if they do that, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
I hope they don't. Like, why are you looking for constant rolling failure of actual socialism?
Because if the Democratic Party has to acknowledge that they're so terrified of obeying the will of their constituencies that they have to break the rules in an evident and open way to everyone who supports them.
They've already done it twice.
Not that close, not that clearly. The ways the 2016 and 2020 primaries took place, it was like, oh, the Nevada voting system, the count process. No. If you don't,
you didn't learn, you didn't see it twice.
It's not about me learning. It's about how evident these betrayals.
How evident are they? How evident is it to you that any momentum Bernie Sanders had as a grassroots candidate within the DNC structure of actually making it to the top of the fucking party? Honestly,
you mean like, could he do it? I think he could do it.
Was there any fucking? Did you what? Like, did you not? Like, I'm asking you, what happened in 2016 to prevent it?
Oh, I mean, it's been a while since that. I remember being angry back in 2016.
I mean, it's been a while, but let's look into it as leftists if we're going to advocate for the continued hope that some fucking socialist, guy is going to get through. Let's look at why the last one lost. Yeah.
Well,
why did Bernie Sanders lose in 2016?
Well, what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that the DNC used superdelegates to ensure that Bernie Sanders could not win in key areas, and his candidacy was scuttled in favor of an unelectable neo-lib Hillary Clinton, which led to the tragic 4 years of Donald Trump.
So I'm not making the argument that the process is super fair, even if it was somehow mathematically and procedurally completely fair. The DNC obviously has a lot of control over the media narrative, which did bite Bernie Sanders in 2020 as well. The concerns of electability, Joe Biden being like the more electable
candidate. It bit him, but it didn't scuttle his candidacy. So super delegates in the key fucking swing states scuttled his candidacy.
I'm not making the argument that the DNC is like a great organization that I can get behind. I'm making the argument that we have seen empirical positive benefits from entryism into the Democratic Party. That Bernie Sanders' participation, I know that if I ask my chat right now, a lot of the people here are only leftists because they got red-pilled by Bernie Sanders running, either in 2016 or in 2020. If we continue that process...
If he put up good numbers as a third-party candidate, would not the same thing have been established,
historically, applied? It doesn't happen. Also, they don't get the same media attention. A third party gets a 1,000th of the media attention that a prominent mainstream political party candidate gets,
Right. And I understand that's why Bernie made the devil's bargain and stopped being an independent and joined the DNC in the first place.
And for it, he reached hundreds of millions more people than he could have otherwise. He's currently got, isn't he one of the highest approval ratings of any politician in this country?
I don't know. Bernie's always been a crowd pleaser, especially when you poll him at home in Vermont.
His approval rating is higher than Biden and Harris. It's higher than AOC's. Everyone loves Bernie Sanders. I'm just looking at the numbers right now. But
the fact that everyone loves Bernie Sanders and twice in a row he's implausibly been beaten by an empty, stuffed suit, corporatist, neo-lib piece of shit is like the writing on the wall for me, because it's not the first time it's happened. The candidacy of Howard Dean was scuttled utterly by the news media and the DNC as they pulled funding because he had a fucking outburst, which wasn't even an outburst.
Wasn't there a benefit to his entryism, though? The fact that he was able to speak to so many people?
Sure, but ignoring the fucking outcome that we didn't get Howard Dean, we got John Kerry.
Well, if they hadn't run, then we would have just gotten John Kerry anyway. If Bernie hadn't run, then we would have just gotten Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden anyway.
Sure, but putting all our faith in the eventuality that some kind of socialist is going to be able to get over the hump that the DNC presents. In the last case, we haven't talked about it yet. We've just been talking about 2016 and the use of superdelegacy delegacy in key states. This last time, can you deny? I'm not trying to be conspiratorial here with you, And I apologize to the people that don't like my fucking tone and shit. This is not me raising my voice. I just get passionate and shit. I think there's actually room for that in the left, and if you ignore it, you ignore it at your own peril. I'm not trying to yell at Vaush. I hope he doesn't feel that way. No. But what I'm saying is, so in the most recent example, Bernie was scuttled. His candidacy was scuttled just before Super Tuesday, when there was a mass dropout of the DNC affiliated candidates, except one, just enough to scalp enough votes off of Bernie to make him fucking unviable against who? Biden and Kamala Harris, who nobody primaried. And here we are sitting under them. Functionally, nobody's life has gotten better because they've been elected.
But the point I'm making... Well, wait, hold on.
What's going to happen in 2022 as a result of that?
I have to reject that. Not having Trump in office measurably makes people's lives better, and there are innumerable ways in which...
If you're, like, I hate to throw it in your face, but if you're a trans person living hand to mouth somewhere, how's your life functionally different under Trump or Biden?
I mean, we can go over the list of executive orders that Joe Biden I'm sorry, this is an indefensible position. If you want, we can go over the list of executive orders that were made immediately after Joe Biden came into office.
About the ban against trans discrimination for youth or whatever, the movement towards that, and the reintroduction of trans people to the military.
Well, I mean, we could go over the executive orders. I don't think the reintroduction of trans people into the military probably makes that much of a difference to your average trans person, though I do generally support the idea of allowing them in the military if we're going to have a military. But I don't want to focus on that specific argument because I feel like it's been done to death. It's not about having faith that Bernie Sanders is going to win it next time. It's about acknowledging the empirical fact that the attempt at winning moved tens of millions of people further over to the left. I can't sign you guaranteed outcomes, only guaranteed processes. Giving socialists microphones, giving socialists the opportunity to speak loudly and clearly to the entire country, that does infinitely more for our movement than denial.
When that energy is funneled into neoliberalism, do you know what you get?
It's not energy.
Antipathy.
No, it's not energy funneled into neoliberalism.
It kind of is, though, isn't it?
No, I think we're being reductive there. When people are moved over to the left by AOC or Bernie Sanders or whatever, it's not like their being moved over to the left is meaningless just because they aren't instantly going out there and forming a socialist third party.
But when the outcome of their movement to the left, these young folks that have heard Bernie Sanders' message and moved to the left because of it, the outcome is Biden. And then another possible Republican administration after this, because Biden has made intonations that he's not going to run again, and I don't think Kamala can win.
For like abolitionism before the civil, before the Civil
War. We're not talking about abolitionism.
What about all of the socialist advocacy before the New Deal was passed? Sometimes you need to ferment public support before you can really.
We are so far from the New Deal, and the New Deal has crumbled to such an extent that it's laughable to even bring it up.
At the time, there were decades of socialist advocacy, union worker advocacy.
We don't have decades. We've just agreed.
Right, but we're already investing decades into this, so maybe we're closer to the outcome.
So sunk cost fallacy?
No, it's a working process that costs us nothing. It doesn't cost us anything. You can be moved to the left. You can have a person run in the Democratic primary, move people over to the left with their advocacy, and this takes nothing away from our broader ability to organize and engage in activism, doesn't it? I mean, and maybe they win, and that'd be a crazy great benefit, but even if they don't, isn't just giving them the microphone? I
hope some of the people in your chat are right. I hope that we do have 10 years. There are people that have said, in your chat, that are spamming in your chat, like, we don't have 10 years. Come on. It's like, no, I hope we do. But I hope within that 10 years, we don't do what has happened with the last 10 years, which is ultimately accept a facsimile for leftism in the form of a neoliberal masthead of the party and a token amount of progressives sprinkled throughout the House and the Senate.
But and what we're doing
we
now,
coast along.
The situation now is better than the situation 10 years ago. I mean, back in 2011, it felt like when people said they were left wing, it meant they supported Obama. And that's all that meant. It didn't mean anything beyond that. And nowadays, like, there are
the fact that people are asking. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the fact that people are asking me in your chat and in mine, well, what the fuck are you gonna do? Were you not listening to what I've been talking with Vaush about? Whether you agree with it or not, I have a position that calls for a course of fucking action. That is a turning of leftist energy towards the causes of labor, and the admission that the DNC is a gatekeeper that we don't have time to overcome with incrementalism.
But we can do both. I mean, why can't we run candidates, support them, allow them, give them the
Have you
soapbox
done
and the
both?
microphone?
Have you done both on your channel with your platform? Have you done both?
Never personally run for office, but I advocate that people support Bernie Sanders, and I also advocate for, positive and progressive positions on labor movements. I haven't like specifically directed people towards any specific like strike or union, but I've had people on from the International Workers of the World. I've spoken positively of the DSA, and I generally talk favorably about like positive class action. I guess I could organize people more specifically along those lines, and maybe I can in the future. It's just union stuff tends to be really, really local, which means that if I talk about it, it's like 1/100th of my audience is like, oh, that's in my state,
Yeah,
it's just
you've been far more charitable than some of the people represent themselves in your chat. I'm just going to stop reading that shit.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't.
What's coming out of your mouth is a far more charitable and acceptable examination of why we differ than what's being presented in the chat. That I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about, no plan, that I don't advocate for anything, and that I'm a fucking doomer.
Well, no,
that shit sucks.
The funny thing is that actually the criticisms that you're making right now actually align very strongly with some of the criticisms that I heard from a very, very intelligent anarchist PhD, right? She was a PhD or a master's, named Anarchopac. I don't know if you'd be interested in watching that conversation, and I don't know how familiar you are. Yeah, Zoe Baker. I don't know how familiar you are with the specifics of like, this is like higher end anarchist theory. I don't know any of this stuff, but I had a conversation with her, and the argument that she essentially made was that whether you want to or not, whether you try to or not, electoral entryism is always going to deaden and annul leftist movements because you necessarily have to conform yourself to the expectations of an establishment that will never work to your interests. That if
you have to find yourself, and I would amend that by saying you have to find yourself in defense of those things in the run up to elections.
Yeah, it's, the only point that I'm making is that there are literal, like, higher tier analytical defenses of the positions that you're making, and I made the same disagreements with her that I am with you, so we're all being consistent in that regard. I
appreciate that.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, and I think very, very highly of her. I suggest that you take a look at her YouTube channel just because she has some really, really good ideas, and it feels like there's a lot of value in them. At least the conversation that I had with her feels reflective in some way. Anyway, I'm sorry. I will
admit that a kind of juvenile conception of anarchism has kept me from self-applying it or really examining it as a possible philosophy. So I'll take your advice on that, and I'll take a look at your talk and some of the stuff that she does.
It was a really good conversation. And anyway, the point that I'm getting at here is that there's an element of this criticism that I agree with. The idea, I don't believe that the Democrat Party is ever going to work to our favor beyond a milquetoast advocacy for progressive positions that any reasonable human being should be on board with anyway. Like, say, for example, acknowledging that climate change exists. What a step forward from the Republican Party's position of it not existing. I mean, it's better, but still, we're setting low bars. I don't think that it's a system that's going to, like, work to our interests. I just think that it's in our best interest to leech off of it as much as we can while we wait for some kind of crux or some breaking
The corpse
point.
is getting rotten. I mean, we just talked about a number of ways in which the corpse is getting bloated and rotten and unsustaining, right?
Let me put my money where my actually not my money. Let me put my ego where my mouth is actually, because I am making a bet to the future, I think that Joe Biden's presidency is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be a disappointment that people can focus on because it is evidently an abandonment of the progressive principles that he claimed to support when he came into office, or it's going to be a disappointment that people ignore because the Republicans do something so ostentatiously bad that people think, okay, Joe Biden may have backed off these points, but holy shit, thank God he wouldn't doing that, I don't know which of the two directions it's going to take, but I want to put a positive coin down on the former. I believe that the next 3.5 years are going to be met with disappointment after disappointment, and there is going to be an outcry from the public against the establishment Democrats like Joe Biden, and that might lead us to something come 2024. Not like a socialist president, but advocacy against the system, political unrest, which is a product of the failures of Joe Biden, and that we might be able to take advantage of it. That's my hope, and I'm going to put down on that. And if I'm wrong,
okay,
then you can shit talk me like crazy in your live stream. Okay?
I will. I mean, and if I'm wrong and are, something enormously positive that saves us from the crushing collapse that is just over the horizon, just over our hills, so to speak, then you can shit talk me as well. We can dunk on each other. I don't think we have cross purposes. I hope that people pay more attention to the labor argument that we had and not the differences over electoralism, which ultimately doesn't matter. Once again, you guys don't need my one vote, right? Or my advocacy. Your guy, if your guy is Vaush, has way more reach than I do.
I will get your goddamn vote, Paul. I will get your fucking vote.
If you can get it from me, you will have conquered Mount Doom or whatever the fuck without the help of Sam or the Eagles. Let's put it that way.
It's going to be 2024. Joe Biden's only campaign promise will be that he's going to scuttle fuck the malarkey. Okay, and I will get you to vote for it.
Okay, if his campaign promise is to scuttle fuck the malarkey, I will fucking come on this stream and give a full apology to you and wear a fucking Biden 2024 hat. It's over.
Right.
But you know what I mean? I'll give you that much. If you can get him to say he's going to cause especially if it's Trump. Let me ask you right before, because it feels like we're kind of coming to a natural end point. And once again, I know you got shit you want to do today, and so do I. But do you think that it's possible in a world where candidates that are viable on either side of the aisle have become far more geriatric, right?
Yeah.
And not to use it as a pejorative, but we had our oldest president ever in the election of Donald Trump. And of course, had it gone Hillary's way, she would have been the oldest. Right. So do you think it's possible, given that he doesn't have some weird cancer like everybody's hoping, or that he doesn't drop dead of some horrible heart attack, or, dementia doesn't overtake him? Do you think it's possible that Trump runs again in 2024? And if so, do you think that it's possible that people give him like a run for it, despite what he did during the insurrection and all that shit?
I think that not only is he going to run in 2024, I think that he is going to crush the primaries. I don't think anyone in the Republican Party stands up to the cult of personality that he's got.
I'm glad we're on the same page there.
Yeah. It would be disgusting too. Like, he'd be like drooling a little bit on the podium up there in the primaries. You know what I mean?
He already is.
Yeah, like just sort of like he'd like see a cute like Republican like girl staffer and like grope his crotch like in front of national TV.
I follow this dude on Twitter who's got his like constant hopium about Trump eventually succumbing to the frontotemporal dementia that he clearly has because of this, and this, right? And it's like, even now, he's just like, well, at least we can, rely on the fact that Trump's frontotemporal dementia is going to prevent him from being propped up on the podium like a zombie and
that's going to help
drooling out his old fucking populist right-wing platitudes and shit. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that, because that's spooky to me. There's a lot of the left right now that's going like, oh, Trump done. There's no way he's going to be a viable candidate on the right. He caused a schism on the right. Nobody's going to vote for Trump.
Twice. We're going to do it again.
Please. Tell me it's not so, Vaush.
We're going to do it again. It's going to happen right over again. And I guess I can't wait. I don't know.
Say it ain't so, bro.
Geriatric.
Say it ain't so.
Trump up on stage. If nothing else, will make for lots of content for me and mine. So.
Sure. Same goes my way. So anyway, yeah, I had fun. Thanks for having me. I felt like, in retrospect, this was a lot less, annoying, I guess, towards the end as our last conversation. So
this conversation substantially to the.
I tried some different shit. Can I share with your chat my high-level debate technique real quick before I go?
Oh, they love those. Yeah, hit them up.
Oh yeah, dude, high-level giant brain debate technique, right? I had a notepad open and I took notes while Vaush was talking, so I made sure that I stayed on topic and, reined it in when I started yelling and stuff.
That's like cheating too. Like, people don't realize how powerful that is, keeping notes.
It's cheat codes.
It's really, really important. People, I actually recently started showing my notes on stream, and people like clap for them. Like, they're so excited. Like, it's really cute. They're very useful.
One of my notes is Schmurny Schmanders, so I don't know if they'd necessarily clap for mine.
No,
but
they would.
You know what I mean? Hey, it helped keep me on task anyway. So thanks for the talk. It's been good hanging out. Sorry I pooped on you, chat. It looks like you're pretty good people.
No, I checked your chat. They were being mean to me too. To be fair, I'm just saying.
All right. Well, chat. I wasn't looking at my chat. Maybe that's a mistake of mine. But yeah, no. Fuck you guys for being mean to Vaush for no reason. All right. Let's be real here.
I really appreciate the convo. Thank you. And hopefully it's not so long before our next one.
Yeah. Anytime, man. Just hit me up. You've got my contact info or whatever. So let me know.
You take care.
All right. You too, sir. Bye.